Welcome to 10 Best Practices for Magento Maintenance and Support. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Plumtree Group in concert with InSync, Phase 3, and CommerceBlend. My name is Gene Ferreter. I'm with the Plumtree Group, and I'm joined today by Maria Delgado and Ali Hashmi from the CommerceBlend, and we will each participate in presenting today. To give you a high level what we'll be covering, our first subject is maintenance is dead. Then to elaborate on that, we'll go into the new maintenance paradigm, how to do the paradigm shift, go into details on the continuous delivery model, review the 10 best practices for maintenance, how to choose the right partner, details about the free white paper for download, and next steps and Q&A if we have time at the end. For starters, today's presentation will be made available to all the participants, both the recorded version and the deck, so no need to take notes. And at the end, you can download the white paper, which will be 10 things your Magento team must maintain, 10 best practices that you need to follow, and that will be available at the end of today's session. So to get started, with a rather revolutionary idea, maintenance is actually dead. What do you mean it's not fixed yet? I told them we needed that button 3 weeks ago. We've all seen this guy. I know I'm going to heaven because I'm already in hell. We like your design, Joe, but Frank has a small change, Barb has a change, Joe has a change, I have a change, John has a change, and Jim has a change. Maintenance is dead the way it is currently being practiced. For most people, maintenance is looked at as a chore, even as a hassle. And this is because most people take a reactive instead of a proactive approach to maintenance, waiting until something is broken, until you need a new security patch, there's a bug fix that's required, until it hits an urgent situation. And in addition, maintenance really tends to happen in a siloed approach. Many agencies will have their A-team developers build the site, and then once it's completed, the developers, perhaps the more junior members of the team, will be assigned to doing the maintenance. And a lot of times in that scenario, those assigned to maintenance may lack familiarity with the project history and all the nuances. And the project manager, who may have been involved for months in the building of the website, is no longer involved. The account manager and original dev team may be nowhere to be found. And in this scenario, it's not integrated with marketing, with the business, finance, or any other departments in the company. And maintenance in this scenario, oftentimes interruption in service or features are very common when you have bugs and other security patches. And there's a very random approach with no guiding methodology the way most people practice maintenance. There's no best practices and there's no proactive approach. Don't just sit there, Wilkins, innovate. So how do we innovate when it comes to maintenance? And the first way is to reframe how we look at it, where maintenance becomes an opportunity rather than a chore. Taking a proactive approach instead of a reactive approach to maintenance can involve scheduling sessions in advance, not waiting until things break or go wrong, but instead planning how you're going to iteratively improve the website. An integrated approach that includes all members of your team across departments, not just siloed to one or two people when something goes wrong, and using a continuous delivery model, which is a more iterative approach, a phased approach, where it's lower risk and frequent delivery instead of one giant delivery and a bunch of small fixes. And in this whole process, adherence to best practices and how you approach maintenance. In this new maintenance paradigm, the time to market is much quicker because you're not necessarily trying to do everything all at once. you're doing things more sequentially, product quality tends to go up, the risk goes down, and the timelines and time to market is much shorter. As you can see here in this graph, if you have a number of iterative releases, this way you can get real-time data on how your site is being received, on the actual analytics that you're getting, true insights in response to what's out there, instead of trying to plan for every contingency on the first release and then just fixing things when they go wrong. So taking a closer look at maintenance, when you think of maintenance, which has become ingrained in the culture, the definition of maintenance, it's the process of maintaining or preserving something. And today we're introducing a new concept. Instead of website maintenance, website cultivation. When you cultivate, you're actually growing and caring for something. You're growing or raising something under conditions that you can control. With website maintenance, your website itself is actually a static thing that you fix. But with website cultivation, your website is viewed more like a living entity. It's something that you can continue to grow, evolve, and care for. And even the way Google looks at websites, if you have static content, there's no development, no growth, your search results will suffer. So even Google will reward you for having a more live website. So website maintenance is really dead in this model, whereas website cultivation is something that's going to help your business to grow. Now the question is, if you approach things from this perspective of cultivation rather than maintenance, where you're continuing to evolve your site, is this going to cost you a lot more? And the answer is, in polling quite a few developers, the perspective is that traditional maintenance costs are actually much higher than most businesses realize entering into a web development or replatform project. Typically, in the first year, a conservative estimate on the cost of maintenance is around 35%. Once things stabilize, year 2 may go down to 30, 25% in year 3, and then it tends to uptick again, so kind of an inverted bell graph, more of a U graph. In this scenario, within 3 or 4 years, you're actually spending as much on maintenance of the site as you would have on the initial build. So a total re-engineering of the application may be required after 4, 5, 6 years. And this is a conservative estimate. A less optimistic estimate on the cost of maintenance comes from a very impactful piece called Frequently Forgotten Fundamental Facts about Software Engineering by Robert Glass. He posited a 60-60 rule of software, where maintenance on average is 60% of your software costs, and 60% of that cost goes to enhancements, while 17% goes to software maintenance corrections, error corrections. So in this scenario, within 2 or 3 years, you're already spending a lot more than you did on the initial website. So today, if there's one takeaway from the presentation today, consider not spending all the money that you inevitably are going to have to on maintenance just to fix problems as they come up and to maintain the status quo of your site. Instead, by taking a much more nimble approach, forward-thinking, innovative, and proactive, you can use the same money that's assigned to maintenance to instead cultivate your website based on real insights that come from testing, data, and integrated efforts across teams. You can really make your online business grow in this paradigm. So how do we do this? How do we make this paradigm shift? And with that, I'm going to pass the reins over to Maria Delgado so she can walk us through some of the actual steps to making this shift.
Thank you, Gene. My name is Maria. Hi, everyone. And I'll be speaking today on behalf of CommerceBlend, a community that intends to provide resources to online merchants. And well, Gene, thanks again for such a warm introduction. And as up to this point, you've explained very thoughtfully why online merchants should stop looking at maintenance from a reactive approach and instead reimagining what this word means to them and their companies, I'll try to provide everyone with a methodology that will guide them on the variables and steps along this process. Also, I'll try to provide some examples that illustrate the concept, its application, and benefits with real cases and testimonials. So, just moving forward with this, the paradigm shift starts with a shift in company culture. And roughly speaking, when reshaping and adapting this new paradigm, well, as I was saying, the first thing to do is to deal with cultural change. Depending on the company, some things might be easier to do than others, such as autonomous decision-making or responsibility delegation. However, regardless of the case we're talking about, in the end, it will be a matter of how much trust is going to be transmitted from the boss to his subordinates. And due to that difficulty, it is important that companies follow, at the very minimum, 4 steps to trigger such a change, which, truly speaking, is the most difficult to accomplish, and thus, it is the one that will skyrocket or bury any chance of reimagining maintenance as a website cultivation process. So, the first things companies should fulfill to make the paradigm shift happen is to break down the walls of silos and start collaborating among different members. In this way, complementary roles, talents, and expertise work together towards a common goal. The second thing you should follow as an e-commerce merchant is to ask teams, and particularly your dev team, to create integrative solutions between departments such as marketing, sales, and customer service. So finally, all this leads to innovative alternatives or approaches that might be tested over time and which afterwards might shed on insights of how to cultivate your website, not just maintaining it. Moving forward with the topic, and that being said, and once you've successfully achieved to put your team together into a common mindset with shared values, goals, and a vision of the right path to follow, you'll need to incorporate technology into the equation. As an example of what you could use and how you can use it, we've brought into the picture the following tracking and testing tools: Google Analytics, New Relic, and Hotjar. As most people who have been involved with the e-commerce industry, or at least have heard of, Google Analytics is a free, robust platform that allows you to identify who's visiting your website, which sources do they come from, and how they're browsing and consuming the content within your site. So by now, you might be wondering, how will this help me to cultivate rather than maintaining my site live? Well, the answer actually is quite simple. The fact is that through Google Analytics, you can create different settings to track particular functionalities, items, and goals accomplishments within your brand's website, so that as time goes by, you're more capable of foreseeing what might go wrong as the business grows and evolves. You'll likely be able to do this by setting up customized alerts and dashboards for tracking variables that, one way or another, might impact your site's overall clickstream activity, performance, and your users' experience while visiting it. For instance, you might set up within the tool to send email notifications to any colleague that might eventually keep track of a process's flow or of particular variables such as page load times and drop-off rates. Nevertheless, Google Analytics capabilities, at least on its free version, will only help you to identify what is going on within your website and when a potential issue might arise. If you'd like to dive deeper into the why is it happening, what is happening, you should complement your analysis with tools that aim to identify UX issues, as well as in-depth sites performance. This will be the case for Hotjar and New Relic, respectively. So, just to give you a brief context, in regards to Hotjar, this is a very user-friendly tool that offers a wide variety of subscription plans tracking your brand's capability of implementing an effective conversion funnel all over its digital presence, starting from a free basic version which can be used to analyze unlimited sites that altogether reach a maximum of 2,000 page views per day, up to a business plan which has a monthly cost of $89, accounting for unlimited sites and a maximum of 2 million page views per day. Finally, New Relic is a perfect tool for forecasting potential performance issues within your brand's website, as it allows you to store and now analyze huge amounts of software data in real time, extracting in-depth info from the performance of your applications to the experiences of your customers. Among its top features for cultivating your website, we can mention its security program, alerts, monitoring plugins, and simulations of real customer experiences starting in development through quality assessment. The tool's pricing starts from $75 per month. So now we can move on to the right process, which will be the continuous delivery model. So wrapping up a bit. Up to this point, we've already told you from a high-level perspective the path you should consider when adopting the new maintenance paradigm, which again basically starts by adopting a cultural change that provides the most optimal conditions for a highly collaborative and interdisciplinary teamwork, and then assumes a proactive attitude by using technology in its favor and collecting insights that will serve as an input for the whole maintenance and development process. However, it is necessary to discuss a bit further the concept that sets the basis for this new paradigm shift, and that is the continuous delivery model. As a historical tip, the concept has been around for at least 6 years, and during that time, it seems like there's still a lot of confusion out there in regards to what the concept refers to. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see words like software engineering approach, ability, or practices that have been among the most commonly used when explaining what continuous delivery is. But how to be sure which of those words best fits into your particular case? And mostly considering that if we are all connected here today, it's because we're somehow involved on e-commerce using Magento, and we need to discuss an approach for making processes more efficient and the site's browsing experience smoother on that platform. So well, for the purposes of this event, and considering not only what has been stated from the Academy, but also what brands such as the Plumtree Group has proved to be true in most cases, avoiding technical jargon, we suggest you to stick to our definition. We say that continuous delivery is a discipline that allows online merchants to gain efficiency for their web maintenance processes while improving the quality standards for their products and services. Now, by continuous delivery model, we would be referring to the framework built upon the discipline that best optimizes organizational resources. And now that the definition is clear, our next step will be to provide you with the guidelines and real-life examples that illustrate better how several brands have assessed not only the new maintenance paradigm as a framework, but also for identifying the right moment to get a green light for this initiative. Basically, all you need to do from a tactical perspective is to follow 3 steps in order to apply e-commerce maintenance from a proactive approach rather than a reactive one, and thus avoiding all of the overcosts, risks, and time delays that Jean talked about at the beginning of our presentation. First, make sure you have the resources you need to execute this. And mainly I'm referring either to intangible assets, such as the cultural shift and people involved in it, as well as tangible assets, such as the technology, tools, or content that will leverage each team's efforts. Second, assume a proactive attitude by using analytical tools that will help you to identify data trends, and from there on, move on to the third step and grab insights that will deliver the input for a web development model that is carefully designed, considering critical points for Q&A testing. The idea of such model and testing stages is to get feedback before the final product goes out to production, and thus allow developers to correct issues at an early stage. Now, Delving deeper into the first step, how does a tactical plan look like for collecting the resources you need? So moving forward, first, identify barriers. If you look carefully at the following graph, you'll notice that the most critical resources that you need when assessing the paradigm shift for your case, such as an organizational culture that is flexible, less hierarchical, and that fosters innovation, as well as an integrated team of professionals working for a common goal, are among the top barriers that business owners, e-commerce managers, or CMOs must face when implementing a continuous delivery model within their organizations. So next, how can you overcome these constraints? Just start by having available the most difficult resource, a proper organizational culture. In order to accomplish that, just follow these 6 steps. First, get your executive board buy-in. You'll see how things run smoothly and easily when those who have the final say on big decisions see the value on what you're proposing and support you. Second, make sure that your company's organizational structure encourages the staff to be proactive and collaborative. In order to do that, try to stick as much as possible to a flat structure rather than hierarchical. Establish shared goals and responsibilities, and finally delegate more and give more autonomy. Third, communicate and spread the word about your company's culture by communicating how is it like to work for your company. What values do you seek to practice? Fourth, coordinate your team, technological and content resources accordingly. Finally, execute and optimize, especially if we're talking about you adopting the new maintenance paradigm for the first time. As an example of a successful organizational change, we'll share with you 2 examples. First goes to California State University, which around 2014 made a huge IT system change at its main campus, which also affected the 23 other satellite campuses and thousands of employees, staff, and students who had to learn a new way of doing things. To make this change happen smoothly, the IT department instituted an automatic change management system, so one person could make upgrades that will automatically change everything else. What they got right? The school redefined IT employees' roles, clearly explaining who can use what system and what changes they can make in their designated areas. Articulating employees' new responsibilities minimized confusion and issues, and when the new process was introduced, CSU knew the importance of frequent communication and clarification, so all employees were on the same page. Second goes British Airways example, which beyond illustrating that organizational change, despite difficult as possible, illustrates the importance of communicating along this process. Back in 1981, British Airways brought on a new chairperson who noticed that the company was operating very inefficiently and wasting valuable resources. To increase profits, he decided to restructure the entire organization by reducing its workforce. What they got right? Before the chairperson began announcing layoffs, he explained his reasons for the restructuring to the entire company to prepare them for the upcoming change. Without his transparency, British Airways could have experienced employee backlash and negative press around all the layoffs. But the chairperson always communicated honestly and frequently to manage the change. So, coming up next, and going back to our tactical plan for imagining and adopting e-commerce maintenance, and after you've got available the required resources, you should ask yourself, how can I be sure which are the right analysis and tools to foresee any potential issues on my site? Well, if you recall from our previous slides, we've already mentioned how tools such as Google Analytics, Hotjar, and New Relic all combined should allow you to track how a user's behavior flow might look like on your website, and why did he convert or not on a certain way. So coming up next, we'll particularly speak about some case studies, such as Directive Consulting and Heyorka. They both started out as small companies And little by little, they were able not only to improve conversions and grow their traffic by using the tool, but also they provided a good user experience, allowing for returning visitors and repurchases. For example, Garrett Mercott, CEO from Directive Consulting, said tools like Hotjar allowed his team to identify, fix bugs, and find other issues that they probably wouldn't have known of if Hotjar, or broadly speaking, a tool for performing usability tests, wouldn't have been around. On the other hand, Heyorka also confirmed that performing UX analysis allowed the company not only to perform some UX improvements and bug fixes on their site, but to raise loyalty and advocacy among their customers, already that they were able to reach a Net Promoter Score of 54 and a 65% promoter classification among their users. Now, delving deep into the last step for executing a tactical plan in favor of the new maintenance paradigm, all you need to do is structuring and designing a model that works best for your needs. And next, basically you'll achieve this by using all the data that your team has collected through the formation analytical tools, discussing or sharing the insights with your team, and for hopefully coordinating among everybody so this information can be transformed into a step-by-step process with a specific testing stages and flows that in the end improves efficiency and product quality. So when should you assess a continuous delivery model? Basically, we've got three cases. If you're a business owner, think of this right when you're doing your business plan. And think of it when you're planning who your target market will be and the industry you'll be competing on. If you're an e-commerce manager, think about this when an iterative process takes place and is affecting user experience of or web services. It's becoming unwidely due to increasing project complexity. Finally, if you're a CMO, think of this when tracking how their current industry or market might change, evolve, or suffer a breakdown due to innovation. So just to provide a broad example, if you're in an industry related to IT and such as Apple, Samsung, HP, this is an industry that is constantly innovating, constantly evolving, and constantly needs change. So probably if you're among those, you might want to start considering about adopting a continuous delivery model. But there are some other cases in which, let's say, external constraints such as governmental regulation might make it more difficult for you to adopt this type of approach. And it happens in health industry and legal services industry. So just to end this section, how continuous delivery model might be a game changer for your company. We've got this particular points. It lowers risk releases, it fastens the time to market, raises product quality, lowers costs over time, uses and gets user feedback to improve the product, and allows to have happier teams as everyone's collaborating and their opinions are taken into account. However, take some warnings in regards to customer preferences, because if your customer doesn't like you to delivering updates all the time, then you might take some time to do it. Domain restrictions, lack of test automation, and differences in environments. So finally, well, this was a bunch of information, and hopes it was all there clear to you. Now I'll hand off to Ali, my colleague and Magento specialist at CommerceBlend. So how are you, Ali?
So this is Ali Hashmi. I'm going to just do a quick sound check. Jean and Maria, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Sound very clear.
Okay.
Thanks, Ali.
Okay, great. All right. So we're going to be talking about the 10 best practices. It's going to be around the white paper that we have written. and we'll be delving into some details, but obviously, there's a lot more that can be discussed about it. But at least the idea here is to give you at least a sense that what are some of the things that you should be on check with your Magento installations. So starting with the first point, keeping your Magento install clean. As Gene mentioned in his earlier session that, we're going from maintenance into cultivation. And what that means is that the e-commerce app sites or the online businesses that you're running are living and breathing entities. And you're constantly growing. You have traffic coming to your site. There could be tens and thousands of daily transactions happening on the site in terms of site visits, orders, and just other activity that is going on. So what happens as a result of that your server starts growing. You have different server related logs that are maintained on the server that maintains or records the activity that is happening on the server. So these logs or these files, they continue to grow. They could be in the form of just simple files, or they could be in the form, they could be stored at the database level. So you have to be cognizant of the fact that you have to keep your server clean, or whoever is maintaining your site, you have to remind them that they should have a process in place to keep your server clean. Some of the things that you can manage on your site is to ensure that things like images or the data that you are no longer using on the site, the products that you're no longer need on the site, that needs to be probably removed from the admin. There are other things that you can do, like monitoring logged exceptions. These can be done through tools like New Relic, which was mentioned earlier, in the presentation as well. So there are tools available that can help you manage those kind of activities that are happening on the server. And the most important thing are the 404. The 404s are not only bad for business, but they're also bad for your website presence on search engines, because Google doesn't like 404 errors. So you need to ensure that you don't have 404 errors, and you have a mechanism in place to catch those errors when those happen. Moving on to the second point, the database. The database is the heart of any application, right? Because all your data is stored in there. So you need to ensure that your database is backed up. I mean, this can be done through an arrangement with your hosting company, where they can offer you managed services through which you can, the database is having a nightly and a weekly backup. So this is very important that that process is in place. You need to, and those kind of backups need to take place in off hours, because depending on the size of the database, the backing up of database can be a very heavy server activity, which can bring down the performance of your site. So you want to probably do it in off hours, around midnight or so. And you need to ensure that you have a robust backup in place. So from time to time, you may want to do some kind of fire drills where you actually take up your backup and try to restore it and ensure that your backup is indeed useful when the time comes to use it. The other important part that you need to ensure is that your third-party application, especially your blogs, most of the blogs running on the servers are WordPress blogs, and WordPress is not a very secured application, and we have seen a lot where WordPress can bring down the entire server through some kind of a security breach. So we had now typically advise our clients to keep WordPress on a separate server, and same goes for other third-party applications which are independent and just have an integration with Magento. They can be probably managed and on a separate server, so that way your transactions or your e-commerce site is not compromised in case of any security breach on those third-party applications. There are other things you can do, like set up daily jobs through which you can reindex your database that can help you run your database a bit faster. Moving on to the third point, keeping up to date with Magento updates. Now this is easier said than done. I mean, all of you who are running on Magento for a while, you probably realize that last year alone Magento had about half a dozen of security patches that they rolled out, and it's difficult to keep up to date with some of those patches, because some of them are quite involved and probably had you probably had difficulty in getting them updated on your site, because it impacts your other customization that are running on your server. But you have to be very, you have to be quite sensitive to these kind of patches and should be very high up in your priority list whenever they come out with it. Some of the things you may want to consider before updating, running any kind of Magento updates, especially the security ones, is that your website, your current site is backed up, both the site and the database. So in case if anything goes wrong, you have a backup in place. You probably want to try it on first on a local or a test environment before actually doing it on the actual live or production environment, and run some kind of a smoke testing to ensure that nothing the patch or the update will not break anything on the site. Ideally, the team who's managing your site should be running some kind of a version control system through which the code can be managed in case of any issues. The code can be rolled back and the changes can be undo if the patch may cause any kind of issue on the functionality of the site. Also, some of the patches have database impact, so you have to ensure that you have a proper backup in place and should have an understanding of the impact of those patches on your installation. Moving on to point number 4, extension and module updates. Now, we all run Magento extension. I mean, that's why we love Magento, because it has a huge marketplace, and we can get the functionality. We don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. We can leverage the existing extension and modules that are available. But obviously the developers who worked on those modules and extensions from time to time also come up with updates. So you need to ensure that you are up to date on that. Some of the extension developers do offer you like a 1-year free update service through which they will inform you if there's any kind of update available. So you need to make sure that that your team, your Magento team, is proactive in ensuring that those extension updates are updated on your site, and there are a couple of reasons behind it. It's not just the new feature that are added. There could be some security related patches as well in those updates that you might want to install in your site, and also you want to make sure that your modules and extensions are up to date. Going on to point number 5, ensure your staging site is up to date. Now this is we have seen it, we are all kind of guilty of that in the initial, when we are doing the initial implementation, we do ensure that our staging sites are up to date and all the latest and greatest data and the functionality is there. But once the site goes live, then we start doing changes directly to the live site and not updating the stage. Can you guys still hear me okay, Gene?
Yes, for a second you cut out, but I can hear you
Yes,
now.
we can hear you. Yes, don't worry, I'll keep going.
All right. So you want to make sure that your staging site is updated, and this can be done in a couple of different ways. It can be done through you having some kind of a script running that can periodically takes the backup from the production site and stores it on staging server, or you want to make sure that your database and your site gets updated by your developer on a periodic basis. Because what we have seen is that if your staging site is not up to date and it's off sync from production, then there could be that may result into certain issues that you cannot duplicate. If you have any issues on production, you cannot catch them on the staging server. So you do want to make sure that, first of all, you want to make sure that you do have a staging site. You don't only have one instance running. You should have at least a staging instance running. And second thing is you want to make sure that it's up to date and as much as possible. Moving on to point number 6 is load testing and site performance. Unfortunately, this is also one of the areas that doesn't get looked over once the site goes live. Then we just started building new features and functionalities, and we don't keep track of how well our site is working and behaving, and if our customers are having issues in accessing our site. So you want to make sure that the resources allocated to the server is sufficient to run your site. You may want to even periodically in off hours inject artificial traffic to your. There are tools available through LoadRunner, through Siege, and through some other tools. You can inject artificial traffic on your site just to see how the site behaves and whether the site remains available even with high traffic volume. These tools also generate a very detailed report that can help you understand the areas of concern on your site, and then you can have your developer work on it and and make sure that the site is optimized. There are some other tools available like Google Page Speed that can help you understand the ranking of your site or the overall areas of your site that needs improvement. And you do want to make sure that you are running these kind of tools time and again, because once we start building new features and new functionality, it's very easy to lose track of how well our site is performing, and how well our servers are reacting to it. Moving on to point number 7, 24/7 server monitoring. Now this can mean a lot of different things, and obviously you don't want, and it's impossible to have a physical person looking and monitoring the server all the time, but there are certainly tools available, again tools like New Relic, Apps Dynamics, and some other tools that gives you those through which you can set different types of alerts in case of any kind of an unusual behavior on your site. For example, if your site goes down, you can have you can set an alert. You can send a message to your mobile phone or through your email, through which you will know that your site is unavailable for whatever reason. So you want to make sure that those type of tools are in place, and you do have a mechanism in place through which you can monitor your site 24 hours a day, and also to there are certain benchmarks available through which you can check that what should be the availability or response time of your site, and you want to make sure that your hosting providers are complying to those benchmarks. Moving on to point number 8, a release deployment process. Again, it's one of those areas where a lot of developers still to date don't like to use a version controlling system, but there is certainly a merit of using that, especially when you are in maintenance mode, because you do want to make sure that you do have a good process in place through which you are running deployments on your staging and production servers. You do have a good mechanism in place in terms of managing your code, and also if you have multiple teams working on your site, the process is in place through which they can easily collaboratively work and not interfere in each other's work, and through which for that code version control processes, SVN or Git are some of the tools. There are some of the vendors available through which you can acquire those tools, and you want to make sure if you have a vendor, you do want to periodically check with your vendor to ensure that what is the deployment process, and if they are still following that process, and and they have some sort of version controlling in place. Moving on to point number 9. Again, going back to site. Can you change slide? Okay. Site security. Again, other than the patches, you also want to make sure that you are working on latest and greatest version of Magento. Now, it's easier said than done, because we all have been using Magento, and we all have our set of customizations that we have done on top of Magento. Hopefully, they have been done through best practices. If they are done through best practices where the core of Magento is not modified, then the upgrade process should be relatively smoother. But if not, then it can be a very painful process to upgrade to a newer version of Magento. But it's very important to do so because you are buying into more security and working with the latest and greatest features of Magento. Two-factor authentication is more applicable to the backend of Magento, the Magento admin. Magento by default has a link, abc.com/index.php/admin. which is very easily accessible. Everybody knows that URL path. You want to make sure that at least you're securing the backend of the Magento. It can be done in multiple ways. It can be done by securing through the IP through your IP address. That your IP address or the people who will be managing the Magento admin should have the IP addresses whitelisted through which they can access the admin. It can be done through two-factor authentication, where you can have a user enter username and password, and then some kind of a security code that is sent to you via through maybe some kind of a messaging service or through a code generator. So, but you want to make sure, because if somebody can access to your Magento admin, they can pretty much access your database, and a lot of damage can be done to your application. So you do want to make sure that your backend, your Magento admin is secured, and only the people who are supposed to access should have access to it. There are also there are Magento related updates, but then there are also server related updates. So you want to make sure that your server, your hosting company, is periodically updating your servers through those server related patches. Finally, you want to put a face to the name. You should have some emergency contact. If you have hired a company, a vendor who is maintaining your site, you want to make sure that it's not just through a ticketing system. It's also, there should be some physical person you can contact in terms of emergency. So you should, in your vendor selection process, you need to ensure, or you should check that there should be some physical person or some physical contact whom you can contact in times of when your site is not available, or you have some kind of an emergency where it requires to pick up a phone and give somebody a call. So with this, I'm going to hand it back over to Gene, who's going to take you through the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Ali and Maria, both for your deep insights. And I know we've covered a lot of material. Any questions that we don't get to today, we'll follow up via email. We did want to cover this one final topic, which is how to select the best partner. And this could be distilled down to one basic idea, which is asking the right questions. And the first question is, who are you? So you want to find out about a company when you're vetting them. If you're looking for a new vendor, a new partner, when was the company founded? How many employees do they have? Where are they based? Some people prefer to have a local agency. Some prefer to have an agency abroad for pricing. Some people prefer more a hybrid model, so that you get the best of both worlds. And it's important also to find out what an agency's primary focus is, because a lot of people really relegate maintenance to the back burner. It's not a priority. You can find out about personnel by looking at their LinkedIn profiles. And the second thing in vetting a company is, how experienced are they with Magento? You want to find out if they are a certified Magento partner. How many certified Magento developers do they have on staff, or solution specialists as well? And how many Magento sites have they actually built? Perhaps describe one or two complex projects that they've worked on so you get a sense of their capabilities. Find out what hosting companies they work with, and ask if they've done any maintenance on sites that were actually built by someone else, because this is something a lot of developers will steer away from. So the next area is communications. What methods do they have for communicating when there are issues? Is there a sophisticated ticketing system? And what kind of response time can you expect when there are issues? What hours are they available? Unlike hosting companies, which are often 24/7, for application development and maintenance, sometimes it's East Coast working hours that they're available, and nothing on weekends. So you want to find out about this. Do they assign an account manager that you can contact directly if you're unable to reach anyone else? And how do they connect with clients? Do they use email, phone, conference calls, HipChat, other methods? So make sure you find out how they're communicating so you don't have communication breakdowns. The maintenance philosophy is very important, because how seriously does a partner or agency take maintenance? Is it a core priority or more of an auxiliary service? And is there an actual team that's dedicated to maintenance? And of course, do they take a proactive or reactive approach, as we've discussed earlier? And you might want to ask if they have long-term happy clients, which only happens from having the right maintenance philosophy and good response time. And then when it comes to methodology and costs, find out what their on-demand maintenance hourly rates are. Do they have recurring monthly plans, and what are the different tiers of service? Let's say you buy 20 hours a month, is it use it or lose it hours? Can you buy a block of hours that don't expire? And of course, if you have many enhancements on your roadmap, can you have full-time retainers available to you that are essentially an extension of your technical team? Ask about what server configurations they recommend, and if they use a version control system. And finally, after the work is done, what do they have in the way of a warranty? Is there any kind of training if you're more autonomous and you don't want to always have to rely on someone else? And what kind of site monitoring they do? Do they do any kind of A/B or multivariate testing, which is very important as part of the proactive cultivation process? And do they schedule follow-ups? Is the maintenance just done when something breaks, or do you have regular calls to evaluate the analytics and strategize moving forward what's going to be the best approach? An additional resource that covers a lot of what Ali touched on today is the 10 things to maintain your 10 best practices to maintain your Magento site, and this is available for download after today's session. And up next, this is the second in the series for those of you that have missed our previous, which was upgrading from Magento 1.x to 2.0. Please reach out to us because we have materials available on that. And our next session, the third in the series, is B2B Commerce with SAP and Magento, again organized by our hosts in sync with CommerceBlend and Plumtree Group. And we'll have information about B2B digital commerce trends, assessing needs, and how to create what's called a Moscow list, and also discuss the InSync Magento SAP Business Connector, which synchronizes the data between those two systems. And we'll also have a featured case study during that next webinar. I know we're nearly out of time. Suva, do we have time for any Q&A, or should we follow up with everyone via email afterwards?
Gene, am I audible?
Yes, very clear.
Okay. We have about 5-7 minutes for some quick questions. So I know the questions are, require descriptive answer, but if you can answer in bit short, point based basically. So first question is, after going live, what maintenance is needed for Magento?
And I will defer to Ali on questions about maintenance. So Ali, it's all yours.
Yeah, so some of the things that we discussed in our call today, and I think we have it in depth on the white paper as well. Ongoing maintenance is things like you want to make sure your server logs are up to date, your security patches are applied. Like I said, Magento regularly come up with security patches. You want to make sure that you are up to date on that. You want to make sure your extensions are up to date. More importantly, you want to make sure that your server and your site is up to date with any new releases that are coming out.
Okay. Ali, the next question is there any difference in support provided by Magento for Enterprise 1.0 and 2.0?
I think for the most part it's the same, and Magento 2.0 obviously they're putting more efforts into that, so you will have you'll get a lot more quicker response time with it. But I know that Magento in Imagine conference also were looking to revamp their support maintenance turnaround time. I think for the most part it's the same, but I think they're making some improvements in their response times.
Okay. Next question, I think this is a scenario that is mentioned, that I'm running a Magento store and have a question. Which one is a good approach? Appoint a Magento developer when I face a problem, have an in-house developer for maintenance, or be associated with a web dev company throughout? So getting that person is getting almost 50 web orders in their Magento per day, and they have about 6,000 items in their web store.
Yeah, I think I would in this scenario I would either go with option B or option C. I mean, option B is obviously ideal, but the thing is that if you have one developer, you may not get all the skill sets, because when you're running a website, there are different type of skill sets needed. You need somebody who understands the back end of Magento in terms of doing the actual coding PHP. Then there is a front end of design work that needs to be done. Then there is some HTML, CSS work that needs to be done. So you need different kind of skill set, and then in that situation, it's better to have like a development company and an agency who can help you, support in all these kinds of activities that you need to have taken place on your site. But I think it's not a bad idea to have at least a developer, or at least some sort of a technical person in staff who can work with your web development company.
Okay. Next question is, after each and every 48 hours, once we need to apply promotions. So is this the case with Magento?
Can you repeat that question? I'm not
The
sure if I got
question
it.
is also not clear to me, that every 48 hours once, do we need to apply promotions? It is not also mentioned what kind of promotions. So is there any rule in Magento that after each and every 48 hours, people need to apply some promotions, and once they apply, they need to wait for another 48 hours? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so either. I mean, I'm not clear on the question, but at least from what I'm understanding, I don't think so.
Next question is, if I upgrade to enterprise, do I get regular maintenance support from Magento itself?
Yes. So, I mean, the support that you get is product related support. So if you have done any customizations or any modules or any extensions that you're using, Magento will not support you on that. But they will support you on any product related, default product related, or out of the box product related issues. And they have a process through which you submit a ticket through their portal, and they will give you access to it once you get the license, through which you can enter that ticket, and then they will get back to you with what kind of information they need from you to go forward. But it's only going to be if you do any, they will not look at the customizations that you have done or extensions you've used. It's only going to be the core product that Magento has offered.
On the core features, if the customer facing
On
any
the
problem.
core features, yeah. If you have made any customizations to the core features, they will not support you on that, but they will only support you on that core features that are there available in Magento.
Next question is, after go live, I'm using site for about 6 months. If I continue
Mhm.
longer with, what maintenance problem I may get?
I mean, it depends on what you have on the site. I mean, how well it's built. If you have a lot of custom modules and things running on the site, and they are not very well tested, then you may run into scenario where they may not work, and then you run into issues and problems. So again, it all depends how well the site was tested when initially it was deployed. That's one part of it. The other part of it is obviously things like what we discussed, which you need to generally manage on your site, and then making sure that your install is clean, your server logs are not growing unnecessarily on the server and dragging the resources. You are up to date on the security patches that Magento is offering. That's very important. So those are some of the general stuff that you have to track, but then there's some of the specific stuff that is going to be specific to your installation or to your setup, or to the customization that is done on your site, that you have to ensure that it's working and behaving as expected once the site is live.
Okay. Uh, the last question that we'll discuss here is, do you have any framework design recommendation for Magento 2 Enterprise Edition?
Yeah, you're talking about more from the front end perspective, or is it a general kind of I mean, Magento 2 is also built on PHP, but on the front end they have used things like Bootstrap for the framework, for the design framework. So that can be that can be used for development. But I mean, again, I mean, the development for the most part is similar to Magento 1. For the continuous integration, for the continuous integration part, if more has to do, like what I mentioned in my presentation, has to do with how you're doing your deployments and how well you're managing your code repositories and version control systems, and you have a process in place how you do the deployment both on staging and production environment.
Okay. So with that, we will end the Q&A session. Gene, over to you so that, we can wrap up this.
Suva, thank you again. Thank you for hosting and making all this possible today. And huge thank yous to Ali and Maria for their great contributions to the presentation. If I leave you with a final thought today, there's a lot to digest, but the mindset, get away from maintaining your website and really shift into cultivating your website. Make it a living entity that continues to evolve your business. Thank you for joining, and we hope all of you will be with us for our next session next month when we talk about the SAP integration.